What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Fully Inflated Football Podcast. Marcus Whitman here. So we're in a bit of a transition period here with this podcast. When we first started this show, it was kind of a hybrid of my weekly studs and duds recap. It turned into a podcast form. We kind of made that transition mid-season for production, time-saving reasons. But now we're going to kind of transition this into being a more traditional podcast, reacting to things. Just reacting to things, talking about things throughout the week, working on getting this up on all podcast services. Right now, it's definitely up on Spotify. Gonna try and get this episode up on iTunes and all that stuff. So if you are listening to this on those services, leave a review. If you're watching on YouTube, hit like. And then the last thing here, if you're shopping for tickets, maybe you're an Eagles fan, you want to go down to New Orleans, watch the game, or you're a Bears fan, and you're sad the Bears are gone, but maybe you still want to go to Soldier, watch the Rolling Stones here in the spring. Go to SeatGeek. You'll get the best tickets, the best prices. Use promo code ThatFranchiseGuy, and you'll save $20. It's a great deal, so make sure you do that. So let's get into the show here. And no mailbag today. Do make sure you follow me on Twitter. That's at TFG_football. When we do the mailbag for these podcasts, you can get your questions in there. But we got some good topics I want to hit on, and then we're going to get into recapping the Wildcard games that were just awesome. And then we're going to preview the Divisional round. So it's a full Divisional round week kind of discussion here. Full circle, you'll get all the talk you need for the week. So these topics here that I have today, the number one thing, and some of you are going to be like, oh boy, here he goes again. Does defense matter in 2019 in the NFL? And this is, I guess, a controversial topic. You get a lot of butthurt NFL fans, whether you're an older fan and you remember the great defenses of days past kind of carrying teams, or maybe you're just a Bears or a Ravens fan and you don't want to admit that you just cannot win with defense alone in 2019 as maybe you could have even 5 years ago. I mean, a lot of you that don't believe in this point are going to point to the Denver Broncos just a few years ago when they beat Cam Newton. Well, let's just look at the league framework in just that time, just 5 years ago. It's a different league. I mean, the last two Super Bowls, you got like 200 points combined in the last two Super Bowls. And quarterback ratings, which is not the best stat in the world, but it shows you how well offenses are playing more or less. They're up like 10 points since that Broncos Super Bowl, and there's a reason for that. Teams are building more offensively. Coordinators are stealing ideas from each other at a faster rate than ever before. It's a copycat league now. And you've got these spread offenses, and teams are getting rid of the ball quicker, which neutralizes great pass rushers like Khalil Mack. The running game just doesn't matter. All you need is a running back that can catch. Just look at like Josh Adams and Marlon Mack yesterday. Like, these teams aren't building to run the ball. And so the game's changed, and then you look at the rules. Like, even if you are dominating defensively, like the Bears were against the Eagles, well, a late hit or a hit on a defenseless receiver up the sideline on a third down, like, you can't control things defensively. And there's a reason teams are building offensively, because when you're on offense, you're the team in control. When you're on defense, you can have a matchup advantage, but your backs are literally against the wall. Like, you just aren't in control of things when you're on defense. And the other reason that it's hard to win with defense is a lot of these teams that are defensive-minded are building for that reason. And it's because they don't usually have a quarterback, and they know that really the only formula they're going to have to win is to somehow score on offense and keep teams under like 14 points. But it's just not a sustainable way to win anymore with everything I just described. And the Bears lost yesterday. The Ravens lost yesterday. The two best defenses in the NFL. Their young quarterback struggled. We'll talk about Mitch Trubisky when we get to the Bears. But this game has just changed, and it's only going to continue, I think. It's not that defense doesn't matter. Don't get me wrong. you still need to play defense, but it's situational defense, like the Eagles played yesterday. Get off the field on third down, tackle well, have an opportunistic defense. And when you do that, you're not even going to be able to tell the difference between a Philadelphia defense who didn't have basically anyone in the secondary. They got a couple nice players back there, but they don't even compare to what the Bears had in the secondary. But you couldn't tell the difference between the Bears defense and the Eagles defense. And you can say the same thing about the Chargers defense versus the Ravens defense. Like, you just play situational defense. Now, if you're the Chiefs or the Packers and you can't stop a nosebleed, it might matter a little more. But the true championship teams are built to play situational defense, to bend, don't break, like New England, New Orleans, the Chargers, the Eagles, the Rams. Like, I think all these teams have a certain formula here, and there's a reason that the best teams in the NFL are building with that formula. So let's move on here. I think most of you are going to agree with that. Just the defensive points at this point, like the evidence, it just stacks up. But it's something that I try to educate the people that listen to me. And if you're not up to date on kind of that thinking, and it's something the analytical guys have had for a couple years now, it really just, the evidence continues to stack up there, that you just have to build offensive minded now. And it's just the way it is. So next we're going to talk actually a little college here, draft stuff around the corner. We've still got playoffs going on, but we are definitely starting to pivot towards draft talk, which is exciting. The draft stuff last year was the first time I really kind of focused on doing draft stuff, putting together a draft board, doing positional rankings, mock drafts, all that good stuff. The NFL draft season is better than any other sport. So it's just going to be fun to talk about these college prospects. And I'm just starting to really get into the college film. I did a quick glance before the season started, but as many of you guys know, I haven't really been answering questions on these college players because my focus has been on the NFL. Now I can go back and rewatch what happened in the college world. So I want to talk just briefly about these quarterbacks, because I've kind of started to dive into these top, potential first-round quarterbacks, which is obviously the biggest talking point for the draft season. So there's really 4 quarterbacks that I think, as of right now, you want to keep an eye on that are like first-round potential prospects. So you got Drew Lock, who's kind of the raw sort of 5-star high school prospect that came out and didn't necessarily show the consistency you want in college. You got Dwayne Haskins, who comes in as a sophomore at Ohio State, declares early, and he's a really interesting player. We'll talk about him. And then, not Jarrett Stidham, Will Grier for West Virginia, who I need to watch more before I really give a strong take on him, but he's a guy that a lot of people like, kind of that Baker Mayfield-esque prospect there. And then the guy that's really kind of come out of the woodwork here is Daniel Jones out of Duke. He declares early, total breakout season. He's a guy that was viewed as probably an undrafted late-round pick, but he came out and had a huge season. Really athletic, big dude. Almost Carson Wentz-esque at times, and he's definitely gaining a lot of traction. So let's talk about where I sit on these guys. And I actually would say that Daniel Jones, as of right now, is my number 1 quarterback. And that might surprise some people, because I usually am not all in on these one-hit wonder guys, but when you see certain things on tape, you can just kind of say that guy has it. And I still don't think Daniel Jones is even as good of a prospect as Baker Mayfield was. And you guys know I was not high on Baker Mayfield. But when your quarterback class is kind of weak, you start to push these guys up a little bit. And last year's quarterback class was incredibly strong. And that's why I was a little harder on Baker, because I didn't see him as a guy with the upside of Josh Allen or Sam Darnold. And turns out I was kind of wrong about that, but it is what it is. I'll own it. It doesn't mean I'm going to just give up on draft talk because I was wrong about one player. So back to Daniel Jones. He's 6'5", 220, so a little light at that size, but he runs really, really strong and fast. Kind of has that runs like a deer thing. He's not necessarily quick, but you put him in a straight line, he can actually outrun some of the best athletes on the field. And he's got a pretty solid arm. It's not a cannon arm. I'm talking, probably like 92 throw power for the Madden people. Just as a solid prospect. And he has holes. He's not incredibly accurate. I would say his kind of pocket sense, ability to get outside and extend his plays is above average. But he's the guy that I think you're looking at that has that elite potential in this class. And I think as the draft process goes on, he's going to continue to climb up and probably be the first quarterback off the board. The one thing I will say, he reminds me a decent amount of Mitch Trubisky. Maybe it's just because he plays in the ACC, but you'll see that errant throw. The accuracy is just, it's a little inconsistent. It's not a little inconsistent. It's absolutely inconsistent. He can throw an absolute dime, and then the next play, throw an out route into the dirt or oversail a ball on an out route. And the athleticism is certainly there. He's probably not quite as fast as Trubisky, but I think as of right now, that's probably the comparison for Daniel Jones. Then you look at Drew Lock, and a lot of people are going to compare Drew Lock to Josh Allen, which I think is a terrible comparison. For one, his arm strength is just, he doesn't have, he's got raw talent, but it's not the raw talent that Josh Allen had coming out. Not even close. I mean, he has a very strong arm. It's a plus arm, don't get me wrong. But Josh Allen was a special type of prospect in terms of arm talent and mobility. But the general thinking is the same. He's a high risk, high reward type of player. For that reason, I do think we see Drew Lock go in the first round at some point because someone's going to fall in love with how this guy looks, at the Underwear Olympics. My comparison for Drew Lock right now is actually Derek Carr. I think he almost tries to be more comfortable than he should be in the pocket, if that makes sense. When he gets time, he can be incredibly accurate. He is mobile, but he almost sits in the pocket too long. And it's a big thing for me when I evaluate quarterbacks is, do they have that it factor in the pocket? Do they have that confidence? Do they know when it's time to move? And you don't see that with Drew Lock. And part of that is the scheme at Missouri. They did a really good job protecting him, giving him a lot of time to throw. The one thing I will say in a positive light for Drew Lock is, yes, he is a high-risk, high-reward player. He showed some inconsistencies. He showed some high upside, but he's not necessarily so raw. Like, he does have a solid processor. I would say his processor and decision-making is probably above what Josh Allen was coming out last year. So I do like Drew Lock. Before I kind of dove into Daniel Jones, I had Drew Lock moved up to number 1. And then Dwayne Haskins, a really intriguing player. You hate to do the black quarterback thing, but he doesn't play like your traditional scrambling black quarterback. Like, it's just a stereotype out there. But he doesn't. He plays in the pocket. He does not look to run. He has one of the quickest releases you'll ever see for a college quarterback, and he is the prototype West Coast player. Now, the upside is the question for me. Like, I think you can plug this guy in and operate a really nice West Coast system, a quick hitting passing game. He stands in the pocket. But the question for me is, this he's a pocket passer. But when he goes deep and he throws out routes and he throws outside the numbers, he has all of the tools to do it, but he's just a little inconsistent. And you want one of these guys to show that consistency throwing the ball downfield, but no one in this class really has it. And that is really the reason this quarterback class is going to be down compared to last season. But Dwayne Haskins is very intriguing. He's young. You really like to see a guy that is this composed in the pocket, that can come off first reads and break down defenses, that has the release he has. Just having good mechanics like that at his age, it's definitely impressive. So he is a really intriguing player. I would say he doesn't have the upside that Drew Lock and Daniel Jones have, just because he doesn't have that mobility. He doesn't have quite the cannon arm of like Drew Lock. He doesn't necessarily have the downfield accuracy. But I do think these three guys we just talked about are going to find their way into the first round. They all have plus traits in some regard. And these teams, they're just, we see it every year. Someone's just going to reach for these quarterbacks. So I have first round values on all of these players. Would I do it personally? No. Mainly because most of the teams in the league right now kind of have a guy. And if you don't, I think you might as well blow everything up and try to get Jake Fromm or like Tua or hell, even Justin Herbert could turn out to be a top 5 caliber player, or you even look down the road for Trevor Lawrence. Like if I'm the Dolphins or the Bucks or the Jags, like I don't really want to settle for one of these guys, but one of these teams is going to take these players in the first round. And then the other guy's Will Grier. Now, I haven't had the time to dive into his film fully yet. You know, I saw a couple games throughout the year. I've watched one of his games from last year before the season, so I have a decent grasp on him, but he's a guy that could either rise or fall depending on what I see on the tape. And I obviously learned not to question these smaller guys as much after Baker. So I'm going to really try and, not miss on Will Grier this year, whether I like him or not. So I'm careful what I say here about Will Grier. He definitely has the ability to operate the offense. Very efficient at West Virginia, but is he just Geno Smith again, who just dominated at West Virginia and then couldn't, make things click at the NFL level? I don't think so. I think he's more accurate. How good is the arm strength? We're going to have to try and evaluate that. It probably seems to me like just an average arm, which you can say you've got the analytics to be accurate downfield, but at some point in the NFL level, arm strength matters. So Will Grier probably for me sits in the late first round, just because he is a guy that produced at college, and is probably going to impress. And when you see guys like Baker come in and do the things that he does, it's not like Will Grier is even undersized anymore for the modern NFL. He's 6'2", 214. So, you probably are still going to hear that he's undersized, but, frankly, he's just not. And then you do have the intrigue of the Oklahoma quarterback, Kyler Murray. And does he come out, the athleticism, how tall is he? Is he 5'9", 5'10"? To me, I see a guy that can absolutely play in the NFL, but if he's 5'9", which he very well could be, he looks tiny out there. I think he might be advised to just play baseball. So we'll see. Obviously, if he declares, we're going to have to break him down as well. But for now, we'll wait on Kyler Murray. So those are my takes on the college quarterbacks. I did want to talk about the national championship tonight. Real quick, Clemson at Alabama. I know you guys aren't necessarily here for college takes, but big game. Should be a fun one. Basically, to me, I think this Alabama team is the best college football team I've ever seen in my lifetime. I was born in 94. So, 2000 on, I think this is better than some of those maybe great Texas USC teams. I certainly think this is the best team of this Alabama dynasty. So, to me, I think Clemson is incredible, and they are by far the second best team in college football, but I honestly think we might be convincing ourselves that they can compete with this Bama team. And they have the NFL talent to match up, but I look at both their matchups on the defensive line and the offensive line. I just think Bama's on a completely different level. They have a quarterback. So does Clemson, but the fact that Bama now has a quarterback, hell, they might have two quarterbacks, it's just unfair. So they're giving Bama 6 points, they're giving Clemson 6 points. I've actually taken Bama -6. I think Bama's going to win this game somewhat convincingly. It should be a fun game. There's going to be some really exciting plays, and I don't think it'll be a blowout, but I do think Bama is going to end up winning somewhere in that 7-14 range tonight. And I do think Trevor Lawrence is amazing. He's going to be the number 1 pick in 2021, but he's still a freshman, and he has never seen anything like this Bama defense. He hasn't seen anything close to this. So I'm going to take Bama tonight, -6. Excited for that game. So let's move on to the wild card, back to the NFL, and talk about these games. So I put out my playoff predictions video, did really well. First video, by the way, on YouTube to get over 100,000 views. So that's kind of exciting. But, I mean, nobody likes a know-it-all or someone to say I told you so, but, I mean, we were kind of spot on with all of these games. And we'll break that down as we go. So let's start with the Colts-Texans game. Figured the Colts would kind of just do their thing with Andrew Luck, and they've had the Texans number, they've had the Titans number, they've had the Jags number. They just are the king of the AFC South, and I don't care if they didn't win the division. They had a rough start, but they were so clearly the better team than Houston, the better coach team, the better quarterbacked team, and they just had a better defense. For Houston, you're not far away from being a Super Bowl contender, so you can at least take that away from the season. You stayed healthy. Deshaun Watson looked great. He looked like a guy that throughout the season he looked great. In this game, he did not look amazing. He was fine, but was not enough to match with Andrew Luck. But as you move forward, you're optimistic. You're optimistic about what you have in Deshaun Watson. DeAndre Hopkins isn't going anywhere. But you got to fix the defense. You got to improve the secondary. They need another corner. They probably need another safety. And offensively, you just got to fix the offensive line. But you're not that far away. You've got the elite talent. I think you do your best to bring Jadeveon Clowney back. Maybe you just franchise tag him. J.J. Watt, I think, probably has at least one more year of elite defensive play left in him. Just the injuries, though, I would think he'll probably fall off sooner rather than later. So Houston, your season's over, but you have hope next year. You're probably a playoff team next year. But the downside is the boogeyman, the Colts, who weren't even supposed to be good this year, just kicked your ass. And they're not getting any worse. They're getting significantly better. And that's what's scary for the AFC. They've already got the best quarterback in the AFC in Andrew Luck. I don't even think it's that close right now. Well, that's, it depends what you say about Patrick Mahomes. Excited to see Mahomes play in the playoffs. But Andrew Luck is currently the best quarterback in the AFC. Just composed, accurate, extends plays, can throw the ball downfield, can throw short to intermediate game. He has everything. And they have an offensive line that's not going anywhere. They have a young defense led by Darius Leonard, who's just a superstar. They have now, even though no one's paid attention to them the last 3 years, they have proved that they can get really good play out of their defensive line no matter who they plug in there. Just, you're so impressed by this Colts team. And they're going to have to go into Arrowhead, so we're going to see Patrick Mahomes versus Andrew Luck, the two best quarterbacks in the AFC probably. Depending on what you say about Philip Rivers and Tom Brady, who are also going to square off. And it's going to be so fun. We'll preview that game after these recaps. So the Colts took care of business. Let's move on and talk about that second game. And I took flack because I said that I was confident in every game this week except for this one, Seattle and Dallas. And I said this one's basically a coin toss. And I almost regretted immediately picking Seattle because when you really think about it, Dallas just has the better defense. They were at home, and it's just hard to go on the road and play offense. And it probably should have been Dallas all along for me. But we picked Seattle, so we missed on this game, even though it was Seattle for most of this game. Dallas played excellent down the stretch. And there's an X factor right now with Dak Prescott. I don't think he's an elite quarterback, but his mobility, a lot of people will say that a quarterback can't be great just off of mobility, and that's true, but he just makes so many great plays with his legs. And that 3rd and 14 play, if he doesn't make that play at the end of the game, they're going to kick the field goal. And how many times have we seen Russell Wilson with a chance go down and score that game-winning touchdown? But he bounces off defenders. He hurdles into the end zone. He comes up short. But that was an incredible play. And he's made plays like that throughout the season. And you hear this a lot, that he's not accurate. But he has that X factor. And I've never been a huge Dak guy. But I'm buying in a little bit more. I think he's got to come back beyond this rookie contract. I think he's earned his stay. Will he ever win a Super Bowl? That's the question. And I would say probably not. But it's the best they can do right now at Dak Prescott. And we'll see how he looks going into the Rams next week. But good for Dallas to get that playoff win, first playoff win for Dak Prescott. And then for the Seahawks, like, this was almost house money at this point because this year was supposed to be a rebuild. So you've kind of set this team up now for the future, but you've proven that with Russell Wilson, with Pete Carroll, with a pair of incredible receivers. Like, to have Tyler Lockett have the breakout he had was huge because Doug Baldwin's getting a little older. So they're setting up nicely. They're going to be extremely relevant next year. I do think that defense probably a little overhyped, which is hilarious to say because coming into the year I was like, you guys are crazy. Seattle's got a solid defense. They're not going to be great, but they'll be fine. It comes back to the whole, bend don't break, like, thing that I said in the intro. Like, their defense is fine. It's not the Legion of Boom. But now all of a sudden they win a few games, they make the playoffs, and people are like, oh, the Legion of Boom is back. It's Seattle. Like, no, it's a different team. It's the same Seattle team I previewed for the season. Just the overreactiveness on either side every year. It's just people, it's like whatever happened in the last 2 weeks, the recency bias, it just drives me insane. But that's a different tangent. So Seattle will be fine next year. They're probably a playoff team next year after they rebuild some more things. So that game kind of went as expected. Good for Dallas. And then we have the Chargers-Ravens game. And we talked about defense just doesn't matter. It's kind of proved yet again. But this was really the story of Lamar Jackson in his first playoff game. And I've been saying now for over a month, and I've pissed a bunch of Ravens fans off because I don't think Lamar Jackson can throw the ball accurately outside the numbers. And he absolutely proved that. There were at least 4 or 5 throws in this game that he should have made that would have changed potentially the outcome of this game. And he got it going late, but you got to be more consistent than that as a thrower. And I've been saying this the whole time. I'm 1 foot in, 1 foot out, because we've seen quarterbacks improve their accuracy in the past, like Carson Wentz. And we've seen quarterbacks that just really struggle with accuracy throughout their career, like E.J. Manuel, Christian Ponder. Like, it's hard to say if you can improve your accuracy. There's no denying the mobility element that Lamar Jackson offers, but at some point, you got to throw the ball outside the numbers. And even like Dak Prescott made some big-time throws in that game against Seattle that you just aren't really seeing consistently enough from Lamar Jackson. So you go forward with Lamar. I don't think this is a playoff team next year. Every year, 6 or so teams that made the playoffs don't the next year. And this team was remarkably healthy. They were a defensive-oriented team. We've already talked about why that's not sustainable. And frankly, it's not a good offense. So this team has some serious regression potential for next year, and we'll continue to talk about them throughout the offseason. But as we talk about this Chargers team, I'm psyched, man. This is the matchup I wanted to see last year and this year. And if this team would have gotten in last year, the Chargers, I think they could have done what they're doing right now. And I am so excited to see this matchup of raw talent versus brains. It's honestly quite unlike any matchup we've seen. Like, the Chargers are such a poorly coached team, but with so much talent, going up against a team with not a ton of talent, honestly, but just is an incredibly coached team in the Patriots. So we'll preview that game. But the Chargers are hot. They're getting healthier. They lost Melvin Gordon again this week. I mean, he was in and out. He bangs up that knee. I think they're going to have to do this thing without him, more or less. They've got some running backs behind him. But it's all right, because running backs, it really doesn't matter. So big win for the Chargers. Phillip Rivers continues to kind of stack up some of these big wins that he's needed because people have questioned his legacy, if he's clutch enough. But if he wants to kind of solidify himself as a Hall of Famer, he knows he's got to win this game against the Patriots, and that would be just epic if he could do it. And we'll preview that game in just a few minutes. But the Chargers defense was incredible in this game. And then the last game here, was the Eagles and the Bears. And yes, I have a big fat smile on my face. I picked the Eagles to win. There was just a flood of Bears fans disliking my prediction video, calling me worse things than a moron. Let's leave it at that. And it just goes to show you, when you're a defensive-minded team, any game can end up being a coin toss. Like, a few penalties here, a few missed tackles there. Like, all of a sudden, when your strategy is we're going to beat this team 17-14, when that's your strategy, it can go the wrong way pretty quickly. And that's what we saw in this game. The Bears were the better team than the Eagles. I'm not denying that. You just see the dominance on defense. The Bears were able to move the ball better offensively than the Eagles were. But it's football. Things happen. You can let one drive happen at the end of the game, and it's over when you're a defensive-minded team. And that's exactly what we saw here. My score prediction was 17-16 Eagles. The final score is 16-15. The kick gets blocked at the end. I'm pretty sure that is what made the field goal go left. I've seen a couple screenshots now that seem to prove that the kick was blocked. So that sucks that the kicker is going to get so much ridicule when it was blocked. But it is what it is. The Bears season's over. They're another team that I think has some serious regression potential for next year. And you can call me a Bears hater, whatever. The evidence is there. It's the same thing we said about Jacksonville. The same reason we were down on teams just like this in the past. Teams that were defensive-minded with a garbage quarterback that stayed healthy. Those all three, if they were individual, are signs for regression. But when that's your team, literally a defense, a bad quarterback, and staying healthy, those are all the top three probably signs for regression. I think it's going to be a really good team next year, probably a 10-win team next year. But is that going to be enough with Aaron Rodgers in your division? I don't know. We'll find out. As for Trubisky, he made a few big throws, but ultimately he's missing something. He's missing the ability to come off a first read and make a big play. When all's said and done, you're playing an Eagles defense who has a really poor secondary. As we saw in the second half of this game, the Bears receivers were running free. But you just take an objective look at this Mitchell Trubisky game. He wasn't under excruciating pressure. The protection was there. We know Matt Nagy is a great play caller. The receivers were running free. The Bears receivers catch everything. They were doing it in this game and did it all year. Mr. Trubisky, by the way, the only quarterback in the NFL with less than 5 drops on catchable balls by PFF. So there's your proof that the Bears receivers literally catch everything. And they scored 15 points. And he made a few big throws, but a few big throws can't make your game good. You got to be consistent on at least, I would say, 2/3 of your snaps. He makes 3 good throws in this game, but was he good in the 45 snaps? No, he wasn't. And by the way, he had another dropped interception before half. That was kind of a bailout, just a moronic throw into triple coverage in the end zone when you're a defensive-minded team and you know that a few field goals is going to win you the game. So that's my spiel on the Bears. We'll see how the offseason plays out. I'm still not completely giving up on Trubisky, by the way, because he did show some development throughout the year, but in my opinion, it's not the rate of development you want to see in a young quarterback. His development is very marginal throughout the season, if you ask me. It was there, and that's more than you can say for the Ryan Tannehills of the world, who just have never really developed, in my opinion. But I like to see faster progression, the Carson Wentz type of progression, Patrick Mahomes type of progression. You're not seeing that with Mitch Trubisky. You're still seeing dumb throws. You're still seeing him miss throws. You're still seeing him not being able to come off first reads and make things happen with ways other than his legs. He's literally, what it seems is, first read not there, panic. Run, maybe don't run, okay. There's a lot of work to do there for Trubisky, and he's now entering his 3rd season. So with the help he had this year, I would have liked to see even more progression than we saw. And then you talk about the Eagles. They escaped this game. Like, they probably should not have won. I'm glad they did. But, I mean, they're just a solid defense with a terrible secondary, but a good pass rush. Offensively, you credit their offensive line in this game, who did a great job neutralizing Khalil Mack, which I said was going to happen. They did a good job getting rid of the ball quickly, and I kind of liked their game plan. I mean, I didn't kind of like their game plan. I loved it. They have been doing this now with the Nick Foles thing. They were basically playing with nothing to lose, and you see that in how Nick Foles plays. He had 2 interceptions in this game. One of them was just an awful, just F-it throw into triple coverage into the back of the end zone. But a lot of his throws are almost seemingly predetermined before the snap, where he's going to throw that out route, and his ball kind of hobbles a little bit still. Like, it's the reason you see some of these picks, like the ball just kind of hangs. But they're just they're just going for it. Like, a few deep balls led to a penalty or two. It was just acknowledging that they can turn the ball over and stop the Bears' offense. But if they could just get a few big plays, which they got, that they could keep this game close and maybe pull it out in the end, and it worked. Now, is that going to work against an offense? I don't think so. I think the Saints are going to blow them out of the water and take advantage of that secondary. But again, we're going to preview those games in just a second. So that's the recap. Let's get into the preview. How about that for a transition? So we're going to talk about the spreads and everything here. So let me pull this up real quick. The first game of the week is going to be the Colts and the Chiefs. And this is going to be awesome. And I'm just seeing that the Chiefs actually only 6-point favorites. They've been like double-digit favorites so many times this year. But people are buying into this Colts team, I think rightfully so. You talk about, does defense matter? It matters to the extent that you aren't a nosebleed defense, as we could call it. Like the Chiefs are a nosebleed defense. The Colts, they're not a nosebleed defense. They're not a great defense by any stretch of the imagination. But they get the job done. They play tough up front. They play, not going to say conservative defensively, but they have a guy in Malik Hooker back there who can limit big plays. And they are fast to the football with those linebackers. And Kenny Moore is a really good slot corner who made a big interception against the Texans. So you definitely give the nod to the Colts defensively, because there's no doubt that the Chiefs just don't really have it defensively. But the Chiefs' offense is the most explosive offense potentially in NFL history, with basically just Patrick Mahomes, the explosive things he can do, a good offensive line, a great play caller, but Tyreek Hill, who is the biggest mismatch problem in the NFL, and Travis Kelce, who's probably a top 5 mismatch problem in the NFL. And that's what offense is all about, is creating mismatch problems, and they do that. So it's going to be high scoring. The over-under is 57 points in this game. I'm taking the Chiefs in this one. This was the prediction here. But I don't know how much money I'm going to put on this game, because I still think Andrew Luck is the better quarterback in this game. I think there's a chance that plays out, in that Patrick Mahomes might throw for more yards. He might throw for more touchdowns. But you might see an interception, maybe 2, for Patrick Mahomes if he's forced to do some things off beat. Because he does kind of have that F-it mentality a little bit, kind of that Brett Favre mentality that we've seen bite Brett Favre in the ass many times in playoff games. So I'm excited to see what kind of playoff quarterback Patrick Mahomes is. But one thing is for certain, we know what kind of playoff quarterback Andrew Luck is, and that is a boogeyman quarterback, an Aaron Rodgers type of, you don't want to see this guy, whether you're at home, whether the Colts were 12-4 or 9-7. There's one thing that is true, and that is you do not want to play Andrew Luck. I guarantee you the Chiefs wanted the Texans to win that game, but that's not how it played out. So I think this is going to be a really good game. The 6-point spread is probably fine, like just because the Chiefs can turn a 3-point deficit into a 14-point lead in like 3 minutes, because they're that explosive. But if the Colts can contain those big plays, I think Malik Hooker is an X factor here, potentially double teaming Tyreek Hill. I like the Darius Leonard matchup on Travis Kelce, so you could say the Colts defense actually has a decent matchup here. You would think I'm talking myself into picking the Colts to win this game, right? I think it's because I probably want that to happen. But taking an objective look on this game, I do think the Chiefs' offense is ultimately going to be too much for the Colts. But I could see the upset, certainly. And then you got Dallas at the Rams. So the Rams were my Super Bowl pick this year, which I think surprised a lot of people because I've been saying Saints all year. I've got a gut feeling. I can't really explain it. I saw the Rams the last 2 weeks of the season kind of get hot. I cannot explain it. It's offensive line play. It's the play calling of Sean McVay. It's the playmakers they have offensively. It's Aaron Donald. Knowing that, this defense, it's not great. They have a ton of holes, but that dude does not mess around. Like, how many times this year has he ended a game with a strip sack fumble recovery in the fourth quarter? Like, who's to say he can't keep doing that? Like, he is literally unblockable. It's such a nightmare for offensive teams. So, it's just a gut feeling. I think the Rams are going to blow the Cowboys out. I just think they're so much better. They're going to be able to neutralize the strengths of Dallas with being that pass rush. Dallas's linebackers are incredible, but that's really the biggest strength of that Dallas team. I don't see Dak Prescott going on the road to a Rams team that I think is going to have a pretty solid home field advantage here. People have been critical of that LA advantage, but I think playoff football, you're going to see enough Rams fans show up here. So I like a Rams blowout here, but for playoff standards, like a game where they're in control the entire time, maybe like a 31-20 type of game. A blowout in the playoffs is not necessarily a blowout, but you get the point. Then we get the Chargers and the Patriots. This is going to be my favorite game of the week for sure. Like I said, this is the matchup I wished we could have seen last year because I think the Chargers were, frankly, the best team in the AFC last year. They got hot late, and they carried that momentum into this year. The Chargers now are 8-1 on the road. And I almost talked myself into saying that this team is better off playing on the road because of that weird home field they have in LA, if you can even call it that. But this team has really taken on this mentality of we're going to have to learn how to win on the road. And they have done it, which is, I did not necessarily think that could have happened with the coaches here and their history of blowing games late, and they almost did it again last week. But this team, it's different this year. They have learned how to win on the road. They just won an Arrowhead a couple weeks ago, by the way. So for the people that say there's no way that the Chargers are going to win in Foxborough, well, Arrowhead's a better home field advantage, and the Chargers found a way to do it there. So as long as the Chargers don't shoot themselves in the foot, which is honestly a 50-50 gamble at that point, like they did it again last week. Luckily, they were playing Lamar Jackson, so they were able to recover from it. But Tom Brady is going to take that missed field goal that leaves you on the 50-yard line, or that, Antonio Gates or Virgil Green fumble and turn it into 7 points quick. So they have got to take care of the football. They have got to patch things up on special teams. And there's no guarantee they can do that, but those things are more fixable than like, oh, we can't block anyone, or we can't complete a pass on third down, or we can't get after the quarterback. Like, those are real problems. For the Chargers, special teams is a consistent issue, but it's just a less predictable problem, I guess, if that makes sense. All in all, you look at this matchup, and the Chargers are the better football team. For the Patriots, their offense has been fine. Like, Tom Brady has not been a top 5 quarterback this year. Like, he's solid, but just hasn't had the weapons, hasn't had the same it factor that he's had in the past. And for the Patriots defense, they're the Patriots defense that they're going to play bend don't break. They're never really going to assert their authority. I don't know if I'm more confident in anything that I've said on this podcast than the Patriots are the Patriots defense. The Chargers are going to score about 23 to 27 points in this game. I feel pretty freaking confident in that. Question is, can the Patriots outdo that? And it's tough to bet against Tom Brady, but I actually don't know if Tom Brady can score 26 points against this Chargers defense that has a pass rush, that has a secondary, that has just an incredibly versatile problem in Derwin James, that I think is going to be an X factor in this game against Gronkowski, against Edelman, against all of these quick-hitting things that the Patriots like to do. Now, the Patriots are going to come out and try to run the ball on the Chargers, but that didn't work for the Ravens. Sorry, did I say the Ravens twice? I can't remember. But I'm going to take the Chargers. The underdog here on the road. I can't remember what I said in the predictions video, probably like 26-23 is kind of what I'm thinking here. But I am so psyched for this game. And then you got Philly against New Orleans. And I said in the predictions video, this is where this Philly thing is going to come short. I thought they would escape against Chicago somehow, just on a gut feeling, and they did. But this is just a different animal. The Saints offense with this home field, I just think it's going to be too much. I don't really expect a whole lot of argument there. They're giving the Saints 9 points. I love the parlay of the Saints and the Rams. I just think those two teams are far and away better than their opponents this week. So the bets I've made this week are going to be that the Chargers upset and then a parlay of the Rams and the Saints just to win. I'm staying away from those spreads because they're a little big and it is playoffs. But that's going to do it for the podcast this week. I think we were under an hour. We're at like 45 minutes. So we're going to kind of transition now to having these more traditional style podcasts, not the studs and duds. We'll probably have some draft related stuff, but most of the draft stuff will be up on YouTube. So if you're watching this on YouTube, hit that like button, leave a review. If you're watching it on a podcast service, this was fun, guys. Looking forward to another great week of football. So cheers, as always. We'll see you next time.